the parsha, the Ribono Shalom tells Moshe, "V'chol Elohei Mitzrayim eseh shvotim ani Hashem." So the simple explanation is that the Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim will somehow also be destroyed. And not only the people, and not only Paro, but somehow the Elohei Mitzrayim will also be upended. So we see that in the Makos. In fact, many of the Meforshim say that that's the reason there's so many Makos. And why did the Makos have to? Why did they have to begin with Dam and end with Makos Bechoros? You could add Makos Bechoros right away and end it. Why is there, so to speak, this progression of punishments of Makos? So the Meforshim point out, and that's historically certainly accurate, that all of these Makos affected gods that were held to be deities in Egypt. In the ancient world, like in our world as well, the world is mysterious. The world is frightening. So how do we deal with it? So in the ancient world, they took each danger or each fright as emanating from a different god. So there's a god of the sea, and the god of the sea, the Greeks and the Romans had him as Neptune. So the god of the sea causes tsunamis. He causes shipwrecks. He brings hurricanes. So we have to take care of that god if we don't want these things to happen. But, for instance, earthquakes, that's a separate god. And therefore we have to take care of that god as well. So, for instance, in the Greek pantheon of gods, and the Greeks were far more advanced than even the Egyptians, there are about 130, 140 different gods. I mean, you would have a Kiddush every Shabbos, right? If there are so many gods, and you got to take care of all of them, so that created an entire culture of priests, people who took care of this god and people who took care of that god, and it became an industry. Because religion oftentimes is an industry. It's jobs, it's money, it's power. And therefore, those were the Khartoumim in Paro. Each of the Khartoumim represented different gods. And you needed them because of the fact that they were supposed to provide stability in the country and to control that natural disasters should not occur. So, for instance, the first Makadam, so that's the Nile River. So in ancient Egypt, the Nile River was a god. It was a god of the Nile River. And since the Nile was the source of all life in Egypt, Egypt is a desert country even today. So there's a strip of land, today it's been expanded greatly because of the Aswan Dam. But in the time of Egypt, there was a strip of land in the time of the Tanakh, a strip of land 15, 20 miles on either side of the Nile that was cultivated. That was the breadbasket of Egypt. If you went farther than that, then there was no water. So then there was only desert and there was nothing to eat. So the whole population was concentrated along the Nile River. and the whole population was dependent on the Nile River. Rashi expresses that in the idea that in the years of drought, the 2 years of famine by Yosef, the Nile went dry. It didn't have enough water. And therefore there could be no cultivation of the crops, and that's why there was a famine. And therefore it says when Yaakov Avinu came to Mitzrayim, when he came down to Egypt, so it says, Olo Anilus, the water level of the Nile River all of a sudden increased. He brought the bracha. So now that the Nile had a lot of water, they could cultivate again, and the famine ended. And normal times resumed. So the Nile was a god. So the first Makkah is against the god of the Nile. The Tzfardeya was a god. We have hieroglyphics and statues and drawings from ancient Egypt that frogs were considered to be a god. Well, so therefore the next Makkah was Tzfardeya against the god of the frogs. So the Makkahs are going to destroy the gods one by one. That's what it means, Ubelahei Mitzrayim es Shvatim. I will bring judgments against the gods of Egypt. We'll take each of the gods and I'll show you that it's not a god. So in our time in the world also, we have gods. And in Christianity they had all of the ideas of saints. And this was this day, that day, this saint could help you. In my youth, when you bought an automobile in the United States, and the automobile dealer was a Roman Catholic, so he put a statue on the dashboard when you bought the car. That was the god of the automobile. So that's only a primitive belief. But people like primitive beliefs because it speaks to them. You're able to deal with it, to deal with an unseen, sophisticated, unknown entity that requires effort. If you have a statue on the dashboard, it doesn't require much. So then you had Kinim. So Kinim was the god of insects, of lice, etc. So that was also a god. Now the main god in Egypt, Atani Nagodol, which was referred to in the Haftorah, the Navi Yechezkel speaks about it over and over again, was the great crocodile. The crocodile lives even today in the Nile. It lives in Africa in the rivers. It's the most fearsome beast in the world. It lives a very long life. It lives hundreds of years. And it has no natural predators because it can take down an elephant, which it does every so often. And it is a tremendously powerful creature. So the symbol of Egypt, we see it also in the tombs in Egypt. The symbol of the Pharaoh, the symbol of Egypt was the crocodile, Tani Nagodol. So that had to be destroyed too. That was the idea of, many Meforshim say that when Moshe threw down the stick, it didn't become a snake, it became a crocodile. And that's why he jumped from it. And the Rabbanu Shalom wanted to show him that the crocodile is not, it's also only a creature of God, it doesn't have it's not an independent deity, so to speak. So that was the siman that they showed to Pharaoh. The staff of Aaron swallowed up all of the crocodiles. Again, it was to show him that the crocodile was no god. So if we go through all the makkos, you'll see that. The orov, the animals, wild animals. So in Africa till today, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who believe that a lion is there's a god of the lions and a god of the elephants, etc. And they pray to those gods. So these ideas, dever. So Rashi tells us that one of the gods of the Egyptians was a sheep. And that's why by the Korban Pesach, it said, Kulachem seh, take the sheep and shecht it in front of their eyes. Show them that it's not a god. And that's what the Jewish people said. We're going to shecht the sheep in front of them, they'll kill us. And Moshe said, do it and you'll see they won't kill you. So the task of the Jewish people throughout the ages has been to say to the rest of the world, your gods are not gods. That's part of the opposition to Christianity, for instance, within the Jews, is that we always said, it's nonsense. It's not a god. All of this stuff doesn't exist. Can't worship someone who's dead. And this is the idea of Elohei Mitzrayim as Shvatim. So there was a god of darkness, and how do you deal with? So in our time we deal with darkness with artificial light. But if God forbid the electricity goes out and there's no light, so then darkness is a fearsome thing. And sometimes it's so dark that you feel it. Yom choshech. So that was a makkah to show. And Makkos Bechoros was the ultimate makkah because the Egyptians believed that the firstborn were in their own right deities. They were gods. That's why they were entitled to advantages. That's why the dynasty went through them, etc., etc., because the firstborn, so to speak, a god. And the Makkos Bechoros was to show that they're not gods. So all of the Makkos fit a pattern. And the pattern is to negate the worship, the idea, the feelings that somehow all of these things are gods, that they control what happens, that we have to somehow appease them, cater to them. And in the ancient world, all types of offerings were given, and there were many cultures that even offered human beings in order to placate the gods. And to a great extent, humanity has still not outgrown these ideas. There's a lot of paganism in the world. And a lot of forces that we believe that somehow have powers. And that's part of the idea that the Navi says, Vayomahu yi Hashem echad, u'shmo echad. What does it mean, Hashem echad? That they'll realize that there's only Hashem, the only one. U'shmo echad, and you won't call him by different names. You don't say a God of this, a God of that, a God that does this, a God that does that. But that you realize that we're talking about the unity, the uniqueness of Hashem Kaviochel himself. So that's part of the education, part of the lesson here that the Makkos teach us. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakas Yisrael.